She called 911 claiming my pool guest was trespassing on HOA property, but here's the kicker, it was my house. My pool, and I never gave the HOA any control over it? By the time police arrived, I expected to clear things up, but what none of us expected? Karen hiding in the bush wearing a fake HOA enforcement uniform, carrying a flashlight, pepper spray, and a stun gun. SWAT was called in to investigate. What they found blew the case wide open and got Karen charged with impersonating an officer and attempted assault. And suddenly the HOA was silent. It all started on what was supposed to be a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the sun hits just right. The pool water is crystal clear, and a glass of lemonade in hand makes you forget about all the annoying neighborhood politics. But that illusion shattered the moment HOA Karen decided. My pool was her new battlefield. I'd moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, fully aware that it had an active homeowners association. But I specifically bought one of the few properties in the area that sat just outside their jurisdiction line, a lakeside home with no binding HOA obligations, only that they bordered my fence line, and ever since moving in, Karen, the self-appointed president of the HOA, had treated me like an outlaw in her kingdom, constantly peering over the fence, writing phony notices and threatening legal action over everything from the shade of my backyard pergola to the unauthorized solar lights in my garden, despite the fact that none of their rules applied to my home. Still, I let it slide until that afternoon, when my friend James came over with his 6-year-old daughter to relax by the pool, grill burgers, and enjoy a break from the chaos of the city. We were just firing up the grill. Little Emma was laughing as she floated in the deep end with her floaties, and everything felt serene. But then I noticed the unmistakable glint of a camera lens behind my privacy hedge. Slowly panning across the pool area, Karen's silver bob peeked over the fence, her phone held high, recording like she was filming a crime scene. I walked over and said, "Karen, what do you think you're doing?" And she snapped back, "You have unauthorized guests using HOA facilities. This pool isn't approved for external events." I blinked, stunned. "Karen, this is my private property. This pool has nothing to do with your HOA, you know that." She just sniffed and said, "I'm calling the police." "Let them sort it out," and stormed off down the street, phone already to her ear. Within 15 minutes I heard the sirens, too. Squad cars rolled up to my front driveway, lights flashing, and out came a pair of bewildered officers who looked more confused than anything as I greeted them. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Can I help you?" I asked, and one officer, reading off a note, said, "We received a report of trespassing, possible unauthorized pool usage, and a disturbance involving an HOA complaint." I gestured toward James, who was sitting calmly in a lounge chair, and Emma, who was now eating watermelon slices under a towel, and explained the situation, how Karen had no authority here, how she'd been harassing me for months, and how this was just another petty attempt to exercise control over property she didn't own. They seemed to get the picture pretty quickly, especially when I showed them the deed documents I kept in a home office drawer for moments exactly like this. But before they could wrap things up, one of the officers got a call on his radio, and suddenly his posture changed. "Excuse me," he said, and walked around to the side yard where the bush separated my lot from the AOA-maintained walking trail. A moment later, his voice rang out sharply, "Ma'am, step out from the bush. Now." I rushed around the corner behind him, only to find Karen crouched in the shrubs with a flashlight strapped to her belt, a walkie-talkie clipped to her shoulder, and most disturbingly a black tactical vest with big white letters that read HOA Enforcement across the front. She was holding what looked like a stun gun in her gloved hand, her eyes wild, like she was playing some real-life action movie fantasy. And when the officer approached, she tried to explain, "This is standard equipment for patrol. I'm authorized by the HOA charter to conduct enforcement duties." The officer stared at her like she'd grown a second head and asked flatly, "Ma'am, do you understand it's a crime to impersonate law enforcement?" She barked, "I'm not impersonating police. I'm protecting community assets." At that point, the other officer, now joined by a third unit, radioed for backup because they'd just spotted in Karen's vehicle parked down the street. a duffel bag filled with printed violation tickets, a fake badge, and multiple HOA incident reports with neighbors' addresses and photos. Within 10 minutes, a full SWAT response arrived, mostly because they didn't know if she was armed, and her erratic behavior raised major red flags. Karen didn't go down easy. She tried to run but was tackled halfway across my lawn by a SWAT officer and handcuffed as James recorded everything on his phone. The entire neighborhood came out by then, watching wide-eyed as the woman who had terrorized the block for years was hauled off, screaming about protecting order and defending HOA standards. After she was taken away, I found out that not only had she fabricated her entire enforcement persona, but she had also sent multiple threatening letters to other non-HOA homeowners in the area using fake legal stationery, and that stun gun, completely illegal under our county's ordinances without a permit, which she didn't have. By the end of the evening, Karen was facing multiple charges: impersonating an officer, possession of a restricted weapon, harassment, and illegal surveillance. And that was just the beginning, because the police said the DA wanted to dig deeper into her history of neighborhood complaints. I sat poolside that night, the stars twinkling above, sipping that same glass of lemonade, watching Emma splash again under her dad's watchful eye, and I couldn't help but laugh. A little Karen called 911 trying to get us in trouble, but all she did was get herself busted, exposed, and humiliated in front of the entire community she thought she controlled. But little did she know, this was just the start, because what the HOA board found out next would destroy her little empire completely.